Welcome back to the 5th video in our series of lectures on basic SQL. You may recall in our last video we were introduced to the create statement, which is the statement that is used to create most objects in SQL, such as databases and tables and so on. We also looked at a couple of constraints, such as the not null constraint, which requires that a value be input into a field defined as not null. It cannot be left blank. We also looked at the check constraint, which allows us to specify a range of values that must be utilized in a particular attribute. Because keys and referential integrity constraints are very important, there are special clauses within the create table statement to specify them. The primary key clause specifies one or more attributes that make up the primary key of a table. Let's take a look at some examples. Here we see a constraint being defined, constraint imp pk, primary key, open paren, ss no, close paren, comma. That statement defines a primary key. It in fact gives the primary key a name, imp pk. There is no rule pertaining to how you should name a constraint like this, although it is a good idea to give it a name that gives you some indication of what the key does. In this particular instance, it's defining the primary key. Here's another one, constraint imp super fk. Well, that name suggests to me that it's probably an employee supervisor and it's a foreign key. It is defining a foreign key constraint on the attribute super ssn, which refers to the employee table itself, the ssn of the employee table itself. Now, in that particular instance, that key would probably have to be added using the alter table statement, because you cannot define a foreign key to a table that doesn't exist. And since we are in the process of creating the employee table, obviously it doesn't exist. Here is the constraint department pk, which is defining the primary key d number. And here's another one, department sk, which is defining a unique key as dname. Now, a unique key is another key that must be unique. You couldn't use the same department name, is what this says, but it's not necessarily the primary key. Here's another constraint, and looking at this name suggests that it's a foreign key to define the manager of the department. And so it says foreign key is defining the manager SSN as the foreign key, and it's referring to the employee tables SSNO. So it's connecting the department manager to the employee table via this referential integrity constraint foreign key. What else do we have here? Let's see, we have the department locations table, and in this case the primary key is actually made up of two attributes, d number and d location. Here we have the foreign key d number is referring to the department table. So that's a referential integrity constraint that refers to the department table. If the primary key is made up of a single attribute, then within your create table statement, the primary key definition can be part of the line, same statement, that creates the attribute itself. In this case, it's department number int primary key. Let's make a note, though, that that does not work in MySQL. In MySQL, it would have to be defined like one of these. After the attribute definitions, then it would be defined as a constraint in SQL. The unique clause can be specified directly for a secondary key if the secondary key is a single attribute. Same way here, they're defining dname varchar15 as unique. And once again, that probably does not work in MySQL. Let's take a look at some other examples of this. Here we see in MySQL, they're creating a table persons. We see the open and paren and then the definition of the various attributes. We got the attribute name followed by its data type, followed by a not null constraint in this case, and then a comma. Commas separate each of the attributes. Last name, we've already looked at this one before, but you see down at the bottom, after the last attribute's been defined in MySQL, it's defining the primary key as being the P_ID. If we take a look at the SQL Server and Oracle and MS Access versions of SQL, we see the create table persons open paren, and they are able to define the primary key on the same line with the attribute P_ID, since it is the only attribute in this primary key. Here's another one that works in all 4 versions of SQL: MySQL, SQL Server, Oracle, and Access. Create table persons open paren. You see we define all the attributes as we've done before, but in this particular case we define a constraint at the end called PK_ID. We define it as a primary key, and because we are defining it down here, it can in fact be made up of 2 attributes, P_ID and last name. Okay, we've covered quite a bit of material here. Let's take a break. Haven't spent so much time talking about foreign keys, let's just make foreign key our mystery word. So go ahead and submit your mystery word. Go out to our coursework area and check your knowledge on the material that we discussed in this lecture. And when you're ready, come on back and we will proceed to video number 6 in the series on basic SQL.